Ah.
Iquitos, Peru is only a few degrees south of the equator. There are no roads to Iquitos, and transportation to the city is by air or water only. From Iquitos, the Amazon River extends more than 4,000 miles to the Atlantic Ocean. The Amazon is the second longest river on Earth, with 17 tributaries that are longer than the Mississippi. It is at Iquitos where we begin our 850-kilometer journey up the Amazon. It will take 3 days of dawn to dusk travel on a high-speed riverboat to accomplish our journey. During this time, we will burn over 200 gallons of fuel and watch as the last bits of civilization slowly disappear.
This trip was my second journey up the river to meet Chief Bosch's people. While I was excited about meeting with my old friends, I wasn't so happy about the travel on the Amazon. Before we left Iquitos, we'd been firmly warned about the river pirates who prey on folks traveling these waters. The bandits could overtake all but the fastest boats and then, at gunpoint, take everything, sometimes even the boat. Our boat was fast, but was it fast enough? It wasn't only the pirates that made the journey rough. The dawn to dusk hammering of the aluminum hull on the water and the unceasing whine of the engine seemed to bore into the brain. 3 solid days of river travel before we could meet with our friends. How were they? Were they still alive? Would we be welcomed? A swarm of questions bedeviled me as we blasted along the river. And how would they react to Karen? Would the chief attempt to buy her from me? Sorry, Chief. That price would be far too high.
That guy right there is washing his dishes right next to his toilet that leads right into the water. It's very sanitary.
There's the Amazon River right there.
When we started on this trip, I was excited about the chance to meet primitive people and learn new customs. I looked forward to the opportunity to eat foods like alligator and dinosaur fish. I was even excited about tasting the Peruvian national soft drink that happens to be bright yellow. But I started to be concerned when our boat drivers tried to take a shortcut through a flooded section of jungle and managed to get us lost for a short while. While I knew we were fairly safe when we were on the main river, in these cramped quarters we were sitting ducks for the bandits that roam the jungle. Things just seemed to go from bad to worse. With a few strokes of the machete and some fairly serious damage to our boat canopy, we cut our way past the final obstruction and continued our journey up the river.
Each evening, we'd search for a place along the river to spend the night. Friendly Peruvian villagers, eager to see some new faces, would host us. We'd cook our food, and then we'd try to provide what entertainment we could.
singing good night, you moonlight ladies. Rock-a-bye, sweet baby James. Sweet greens and blues are the colors I choose. Let me go down in your dreams. Rock-a-bye, sweet baby James.
Each morning we'd leave our newfound friends and continue deeper up the river. Then one day Basha had us stop the boat. He jumped into the jungle and disappeared. A few minutes later he re-emerged with some gear he had stashed on his trip downriver to meet us. That's when I realized that we were getting close to our first major roadblock, Musha Karusha.
After the long trip up the Marignon River, we had a final hurdle to clear before we could proceed into the land of the Kandoshi. To gain access, we had to pass the settlement of Musha Karusha. When we first arrived, we began the tricky negotiations with the headmen. Things didn't look good. With good reason, and the history of other tribes is a frightening example, the Kandoshi fanatically guard their isolation, and they're willing to kill to protect it. Even with Chief Basha as our guide, the discussion became heated, and the Kandoshi only relented when we agreed to tend to their ill and injured. Even then, we had some concerns for our safety.
They've got a rat and they've got to fight it off.
I think we're okay.
101.
Part of our permission to advance up the river hinged on our providing some medical attention to the villagers. One little boy was suffering from a high fever and seemed to have some sort of growth in his abdomen. There was little we could do but provide some basic medication, reassurance, and a bit of music. On our return 3 weeks later, we learned that the little boy had died. The villagers had expected this and did not hold us accountable. While Ron and Steve tended to the sick and injured, our boat drivers decided to put on a little musical show to entertain and calm the villagers.
If I want to go back to visit Basha, I've got to go through 16 villages.
Today?
No.
Oh, now?
In the future, I have to spend 1 day per each village.
Okay.
So in the future, if I want to go to Basha's village, I've got to take a minimum of 16 days to reach that.
But we have permission now?
We've got permission today.
After leaving Musha Karusha, we mounted a guard on the bow of our boat, just in case. As we traveled toward Basha's home, we stopped at many small villages to reassure the people of our intentions and offer whatever goodwill we had. Along the way, we managed to smash our boat's only prop, a frightening thought as we were now over 800 kilometers from the nearest help. Finally, we stopped for a quick chat with one of Basha's daughters, who stood in her dugout, soaked with rain, and traded news. Navigation of these small rivers requires a lifetime of experience. We couldn't count on having that experience aboard when we left, so we charted our path through the labyrinth of waterways with a little help from the sky. As we pushed our little gang further and further along, the journey upriver began to seem more like a journey back into time. Native construction and architecture became more apparent at each stop, and Basha would converse from the boat with every group we saw. Sometimes he indicated to us that it would not be safe for us to go onto the land to meet the village, but other times we were welcomed with a warmth that gave us the sense that we were in our homeland. Sometimes we received friendly waves, other times glares and arm-crossed chests were the greeting. Still, we pushed ahead. Finally, we arrived at Basha's village. It was dark, almost 2 in the morning. But somehow they seemed to know we were coming. Tomorrow, we would meet the tribe. Soon after we arrived, the Indians decided to hold a party to welcome us. As the party began, Chief Basha went to each of us in turn and welcomed us to his community.
Welcome to the community. We're glad you were here. He's going to play the drum. He'd like to welcome you, drink masato, and they're going to dance and enjoy the party, the reunion. Gracias.
We were surprised to see that most of the men showed up in jeans, slacks, and polo shirts. When we asked why they wore these clothes instead of the more traditional wardrobe, Basha explained that the men wanted to make us feel comfortable on this special occasion. Later we learned that the men had worked months hunting, fishing, and cutting timber to earn the money for the clothing. I set up a video monitor so the Indians could see themselves on TV. They were astonished and delighted by what they saw. Each of the members of the expedition brought with him special skills. We demonstrated these skills during the party. Karen danced, I did a few simple magic tricks, Alan sang, and Steve played his flute. Hours later, the party was still going strong, so Karen and I quietly retired to the jungle.
News travels fast along the Amazon. When the neighboring tribes heard there were visitors, many piled into their dugout canoes to come see us. In some cases, they traveled for 2 days or more just to get a glimpse of the white giants from the north. Basha's older brother Pawanchi was fascinated with Ron's electric razor. It was funny seeing him try out the razor, especially since he didn't have any facial hair to speak of. It was doubly ironic because Ron didn't even know why he brought the shaver in the first place. He obviously doesn't use one. Ron and I never thought we'd ever understand what it's like to be a TV. We were the TV and the villagers were the spectators. Everything we did, from brushing our teeth to filtering our water, was fascinating and delightful to them. Fortunately, they understood the need for privacy for certain activities. One of our cameras had a large color monitor. We let the villagers look into it while we recorded, and they were in awe. The villagers didn't quite understand how their images got into that little gadget. They had never seen a TV, much less a camera. At first they were a little frightened of it, then it became sort of a game and a form of amusement for them. Despite all the attention we received and the interest in our goods, they never touched any of our possessions without permission, and even then always put things gently back where they had found them. This thatch-covered hut was our home for the expedition members. A whole Kandoshi family moved out of this hut just to accommodate our stay in the jungle. The rains came daily in a deluge that usually lasted for 2 hours or so. This tended to have effects on our sensitive electronic equipment, in particular the microphones for our cameras. The Indians wanted Ron to demonstrate his slingshot on the noisiest member of their tribe, so he did, from cock-a-doodle-doo into the stew in less than a minute. Ron wants me to explain a little scenario that happened last night while I was peacefully brushing my teeth. I turned on my Petzl light about 9 o'clock, pitch dark outside, peacefully brushing my teeth, having fun. Over flies this humongous cockroach and lands right on my lip. And he grabbed onto my lip with his claws, so I whacked him off with my hand, flung it on the ground. Ron stepped on it and gave it to me as a souvenir. This is a monster cockroach, and I hear they even get bigger than that up here. This mangled mess was once a beautiful caterpillar. Soon after we arrived, some villagers brought in a little girl who had picked up the caterpillar. The spines of the insect contain a very potent neurotoxin that causes incredible pain. Despite our efforts, she cried for days. Other threats were less obvious. Monkeys in the canopies of our huts sometimes made off with our stuff, and other times would defecate or urinate in our food. And then there was the sloth. Poor thing, he's yelling at me in his own little gentle way.
Tear your nose off in his little gentle way.
He's in high speed mode right now.
That's right.
He's got a lot of his adrenaline is pumping. He says, "I'm going to get you." I'm going to get his mug. Hey. I can't tell how far away he is.
The Kandoshi take advantage of just about every protein source available. When we heard they were heading off to gather some big juicy grubs, we decided to go along. And what we got was a little bit more of an adventure than we were expecting. They began by locating the rotting hulk of an old palm tree. Once they've located one, they tear it apart with axes. Inside, we find those juicy morsels that Karen learned to love so much.
Todo, come todo.
No, mira, sí.
Three grubs found in the palm tree that they've downed for chanta earlier in the month. It takes about a month or so for the palms to develop. After you extract the palms, you just crush the head, kills it, and then you just eat the whole thing whole. You can fry them or you can eat them raw. And the taste is not, it's not a bad flavor to it. It's kind of greasy and oily and has a palmish flavor to it. It's not bad.
This is one of the great delicacies of the jungle. Nothing better than a fat worm. It's not too bad. Tastes like worm and palm. I guess that's what it eats, palm. That's the only thing you don't eat is the head.
Karen thought those grubs were pretty tasty, so we had to hide a few in order to discover what the flavor was going to be when they were cooked. I sure wouldn't recommend Surrey grubs for heart patients. When you cook them, you see how much fat's in them. In fact, well, they kind of resemble bacon and legs.
It's not every day you get to eat a worm, but then again, this isn't every day. You can eat it, but you can survive off of it, but it tastes like
Shoot!
You have a butterfly on the back of your head.
No, va a comprar. Cuando una mariposa le gusta una.
In some cases, just adding a new flavor to the dinner table can require an awful lot of energy.
This is a chambire fruit, and it's found on a chambire tree. Chambira tree. The Apu is telling me the correct pronunciation. Chambira tree, and it's very good. And it contains water in the inside. Once you cut it in half, and you drink the water, and you have to actually down the tree to get it. And you can't climb up it. There's spines all the way up it, so they down the whole tree. And
Aquí está agua, adentro agua.
and there's agua, and there's a hole right there, and that's where the water comes out. It's very sweet.
During our travel up the river, we'd seen homemade oil lamps burning in most of the villages where we stopped. Even in Basha's village, there were literally dozens of the lamps lighting the night. The source of fuel for these little lights was anything from gasoline to kerosene, diesel oil to plant oil. The way the lights are made allows them to burn just about any liquid fuel. Naturally, the fuel we brought in with us became a highly prized commodity and an exchange for the hospitality they showed us. This is how the lamps are made.
What you just saw made was a jungle candle, very common in the Amazon basin. People use the common materials available to make a serviceable candle. A spent battery, where they peel the casing off of it. They reshape the casing back into a cylinder using a piece of wood. They take the cap, put a hole in it, which the battery casing would fit down through. They use a bottle or a can, which the cap would fit onto. Then they take and they put a piece of cloth through the battery casing and assemble it just like you just saw. With that, they fill the bottle with gas or kerosene, and they have a long burning candle. Using matches in a wet tropical environment, the traditional way most people think of striking a match is lengthwise across the striker. This doesn't work very well in a wet tropical environment because not only does the striking pad, but the match contains some amount of moisture. If you try to strike lengthwise, you may run the risk of destroying the match head and not lighting it. Instead, people here take the match and they strike it obliquely across it. And the match lights better, and you don't have to worry about the head coming apart trying to strike the match lengthwise.
One of the goals we hoped to accomplish on this trip was the testing under jungle conditions of blades and tools from Gerber, Simonich, Tops, Bussey, and Cold Steel. We had no reason to expect any of these blades to fail. We'd already used a rigorous selection process before adding their weight to our gear. However, Euler found our collection of blades fascinating and used every opportunity to try out the knives. He even used the new Tops Anaconda to fell and harvest a jungle palm tree. Normally, he uses an axe. Quite an undertaking. From time to time, one of the Kandoshi would ask him if they could examine the knives. They were awestruck and amazed by the quality and durability of our steel tools. Before we left, we presented knives from cold steel, Tops, and Gerber to the Indians or their wives. They were delighted. One rainy afternoon, Basha's ancient mother, rumored to be the oldest living Kandoshi, began to sing. The song, we were told, was about the old days and the unimaginable things she'd witnessed in her life. We were honored to hear her canta, and I'm sorry that we were unprepared to record her story. We saw some baby gators, so we decided to snatch a couple for dinner.
There you go. Got a little chow there. Half asleep. But he's not. His eyes are, see there how they close over? That protects the eyes when they're underwater.
Once you've seen how hard they can bite, you decide it's a good idea not to carry them on your belt. If you want to carry them there, brain them. Even little ones like this take a lot of killing. Sometimes they keep on moving even after you've, well, brained them. The jungle is home to a variety of large rats. The mahas, or nuhe, is a good example of one of the fine meals that can be harvested on the jungle floor.
This here is a nuhe. It's a type of rat, big old rodent. They grow a little bit bigger than this out in the jungle, but they make a fine meal. Rat meat is always good and tender. Now this one has already been tossed in the fire and the skin's been burned, the fur's been burned off. So nice meal to go here. Gotta have that rat.
The village children aren't shy when it comes to preparing these tasty morsels.
Nice not having to do this myself for a change. Ripa?
One of the tools most frequently associated with the Kandoshi is the use of the blowgun for hunting and protection from enemies. The creation of a blowgun begins with two pieces of wood. These have been split from the trunk of a single tree. Once the two pieces of square wood are roughly mated one to the other, the rough outline of the finished blowgun is then carved into the exterior of the two pieces. Once the rough shaping of the blowgun is completed, 2 pieces of split wood are driven into the ground to act as a sort of a rough vise. This will keep everything secure while the next step takes place. The 2 halves of the rough blowgun are now aligned inside the vise, and then they'll be bound in place with vines.
They begin by using a machete to cut the groove in both halves. Then they use sand from the river banks to smooth it out and round it. Back and forth slowly with the sand. Con un palito. Tú vas a poner arena como así. Sobla con un palito como así. They take the sand, they set it there, and then they put a stick over it and they grind it back and forth and it rounds it out. Now what he's going to do is he's going to bind the 2 halves together, and then they're going to ramrod it to make the 2 halves fit together smoothly.
The string used to hold both halves of the blowgun together is handmade from fibers found in the jungle.
Down at the other end, he's going to secure these here with tomshi vine. He's got the tomshi vine right there. He's going to wrap it around, secure this. They're going to take like a ramrod through it using sand, and they're going to smooth the insides out.
No una pone, pero dos pone partido, pues.
Yeah.
Sí, dos.
The next step is the creation of the grinding compound used on the ramrod. What he's taken is a piece of sandstone. He'll mash it up and turn that into the powder that's needed to grind the interior of the blowgun to a smooth finish.
Piedra de cielo, tú cuando traes. Cha, cha, cha. Como te paras para ta cacete sta pe. Mikaya.
The finished powder is poured into a bowl, and then just enough water to make it into a thick paste is added. This allows the paste to cling to the ramrod he's going to be using in just a moment. The incessant screaming of the children seems to thicken the paste even faster. After polishing the bore with a gritty paste, Basha spits liquid down the length of the bore to wash the larger granules out. This leaves behind the fine sand grains, and then he continues to polish. After thoroughly polishing the bore, he washes the interior clean with water and then checks to make sure that it's absolutely straight and very smooth.
Tá tu shantam, já tranquilo. Antam tá. Primeiro vou limpiar este, sucio este.
The next step is to prepare the binding vines which will be used to hold the 2 halves together for the final assembly. The first thing he does is remove the bark. Then he'll shave the vine down until it's nearly flat.
Para qué quieres? Ya está terminado, está terminado por ahí.
Notice how he ties cord down the length of the pole. This keeps the two halves properly aligned while he does the wrapping with the flattened vine. The next step is the final sealing of the blowgun. In order to accomplish this, they use a combination of beeswax and tree sap. The trees there are probably something related to the rubber tree. It looked like a latex compound. At any rate, when it gets hot, it gets soft. And when it cools off, it becomes hard, but not so hard that it's brittle. It takes a long time and a lot of that sealing material to completely cover a 10-foot blowgun. After the entire blowgun is covered with the sealing compound, the final step is to heat the outside of the blowgun over a fire and then rub it out with a wet palm heart. The mouthpiece for the blowgun is made from a piece of leg bone. The darts are nothing more than thin strips of wood sharpened to a point. To help them fly true, kapok fluff is spun around the tail of the dart. Kapok is a cottony material found in certain trees in the jungle. The Kandoshi used the sharp teeth of the piranha to score a line a couple of inches back from the tip of the dart. The purpose of the line is to give the dart a weak spot. When the dart encounters an animal, the dart will break at the weak spot, leaving behind the poison tip. The new blowgun shoots well, and the dead monkey isn't complaining.
This is a completed handmade Masato bowl, and the drink Masato, it acts like a social glue that binds these people together. But there's two very important processes that we need to look at. The first one is the actual making of the bowl itself. The second is making the Masato that they drink. Let's go ahead and take a look at those two processes. The act of drinking Masato is a very important gift from the Kandoshi wives to their husbands. This act actually involves 3 steps: making of the bowl, the making of the Masato, and the presentation of the Masato in the bowl. The process of making the bowls begins in any one of the dozens of little water-filled pits like this one buried deep in the jungle. First, the woman stamps the clay with her feet to separate it into balls. Then she picks the balls out of the water and places them in her handmade basket, wraps them in leaves, and walks them back into the village for preparation. Back at the village, they lay down a sturdy cloth and spread out a layer of wood ash. They then unroll the heavy ball of clay. They burn the bark of the mokawa tree to get this powdery-like substance, and they mix it in with the clay that we got from the stream. And this is mixed in together, and when they get a good mixture of it, that is the clay that they use to make the Masato bowls with. Kind of like kneading dough with your feet. I asked her why she adds the wood ash to the clay. She said that without it, the bowls would break in the firing process. This little boy just made this little Masato bowl for me. He's all excited about it, isn't it cute? I love the kids here, they're great. Before she starts to form the bowl, she checks the clay for lumps and twigs.
You get all 3 stages.
Oh, it's so soft. It's still not all the way dry. The construction of the bowl begins as a series of spirals of clay. Notice that the clay is laid down as a series of offset rings, one at a time. They use a thin, flat piece of hardwood to shave and smooth the walls of the bowl. It looks like she took the clay and spit on it, and to make it adhere to the bottom of the piece of wood here. Look at this little
Perrito.
Mam, na shero sham yishti ko chakaya tangi itiu pero shna shisha kaya tangi pa na shisha to chama saba simpo kaya ta chama yishti ko chiwana te kaya tangi yishti ko chiwana te kaya.
They insisted that I try it out. Not wanting to offend my headhunter hosts, I obliged them, and in the process, I think I provided them with a great deal of amusement.
I want to show you the difference between an expert and a novice. This is an expert, right here. This is a novice. But I tried, didn't I? They're all laughing at me. Every move I make, I totally messed up, and they were laughing at me. Oh well, what can you do? After the bowls have been dried in the sun for a couple of days, they take a pod from a chambura fruit and they rub the outside of the clay bowl and prepare it for putting it in the fire. This polishes the outside of the bowl. After she's finished polishing the outside and the inside, making it completely smooth, she's going to let it dry for one more day. Then tomorrow, before she puts it in the fire, they're going to paint it using pods that they get paint from. Paint it, decorate it, and the bowls that make it through the fire process and don't crack are the ones that will receive the masato and that will be used in the tribe for drinking masato.
Yeah. No, yeah. Nato, este copana que pinta esta bimanca tita. Abi hermano. Abi pruébare.
He's going to let you paint it.
They first warm the bowls in a very low fire, then they build the fire larger. As you saw, we painted the initial designs in the bowls. Now what we're doing is, there's a bowl in the middle of the fire here. It's going to be placed in that fire and held in that fire for 30 minutes. When that's done, we'll take it out and we'll do the last of the painting, and then we're pretty much done with the process. Okay, it's probably about 90 degrees out here right now. We're firing bowls. So it's probably close to 100 degrees in this little hut, and it's probably about 95% humidity. So it's pretty warm. About 25% of the bowls don't make it through the firing process, and another 10% are destroyed when they add the final glaze.
Oh, that's beautiful.
Using a stick to stabilize the very hot bowl, they begin to apply a colored resin. The hot bowl heats the resin so much that it soaks into every crevice of the bowl's surface. Then, when the bowl cools, the resin hardens and forms a protective and decorative coating.
She's using just the pure resin on the inside and using the resin mixed with the colorful fruit, the red resin on the outside. Finally get one.
Mama.
This is the achiote pod that they get the color for the resin in. And you can see, if you open it up, this is where they get the red color. This achiote is then mixed with a resin that they get from a tree around here. It smells really good. And this is the final result. This is what they end up painting the bottom of the bowls with. That's what gives it the shine. That's it. And this is the finished product. This amazingly primitive technique produces this most beautiful product. I'm very impressed. After they're done making the bowls and they've used them and they need to keep them somewhere, this is where they place them. They break easily, so they keep them in their basket, and when they need to use them, they just come and pick them up, and that's where they always keep their clean bowls. What they're doing is they're taking the yucca that they've just gathered and they're going to boil it up. They're starting to make the masato now. They're going to boil it up. After this raw yucca is boiled, what they do is they mash it up in like we do mashed potatoes, and they take a little bit of it and chew it up and spit it back into the bowl, and that starts the fermentation process. This is kind of like a primitive pressure cooker. This is filled with the raw yucca, and it's covered with these leaves from the topa tree. And these leaves hold the moisture in from the boiling water so that all of the yucca inside will be able to be cooked.
She starts the mashing process by pressing down on the top of the leaves. Then she pours out the excess water. Using either a stick or an old boat oar, they tear apart the pieces of yucca. At this point, they start to gather the family and work up a big load of mucus. After the woman of the house gets a good load in her mouth, she masticates it until she's salivating throughout the components, and then she spits it into the container. The Kandoshi men almost never drink water. Masato is the main source of fluids in their diet. It also provides a good supply of vitamins.
The women here are very proud of the masato that they make. Each woman makes their masato just a little bit different than other women. So when a man, they primarily make this for the men, when a man enjoys their masato, they're very proud that they did something very, very good.
The enzymes in the mouth help to break the starchy yucca into sugars, and that's what really starts the fermentation process.
Oh, God.
That's him, yeah.
Girls learn to make masato when they're young, so they'll be more attractive as a marriage partner later on. I know that Ron finds this kind of behavior very attractive.
And I want her to spit when she does it.
There it goes.
Even the bystanders get into spitting into the beer. Back home, when we have the neighbors over, we build a barn or we drink beer. But it never occurred to us to get together in the barn to hawk loogies in the beer.
Stuff's really sticky.
Mucus.
It's mucusy. The heat mixed with the saliva. This is a lot of work. These women go through a lot to make this. This is really hard work. But they put a lot of pride and joy in doing it too.
This is what the actual finished mash looks like. Now this is going to ferment in here and they're going to keep it closed. It's quite warm out today. The longer that they let it ferment, the more alcohol that's in it. Generally, when they drink it in a casual surrounding, it doesn't have much alcohol in it. But if they want to drink something with more alcohol in it, they usually only use that when they go out to go hunting. That's their traditional thing. This is another type of masato. It's made with the pifuayo pod that comes from a palm tree. And they basically make this masato the exact same way they do with the yuca. They boil it, mash it, spit it, and then let it ferment. And it just has a different flavor than the masato made with yuca. Well, Ron, we worked hard on this beer. What do you think?
It's good.
Hunting and gathering is a way of life for the Chapra Indians. So they were delighted when I offered the boat to transport us upriver to a nice hunting area. I didn't know it at the time, but one of the things the Indians do before going out on a hunt is, well, they need a little bit of liquid refreshment. That meant masato, beer. Naturally, when we arrived, I was expecting to have some of the more traditional masato I'd gotten used to. However, this time they pulled out something special. I guess this one had been sitting underneath one of those palm trees for a few days. At any rate, it was nasty. The hunt started off as a slog through deep mud, punctuated occasionally by a bird call or some other kind of an animal call that our guides would make. Once in a while you'd hear something respond, usually something hidden in the jungle canopy or far off in the distance. Basha made a simple call out of a leaf from a tree, and then he made the noise. A little while later I heard the identical noise, only this time it was coming from the real animal. Then the hunt began. I don't know how he could see his target, but he hoisted his ancient 16-gauge shotgun to his shoulder and fired. I guess he was being kind because he didn't drop the bird right on my head. But there's still one to go. Until that moment, I never really considered eating a toucan. As Basha and his brother Puanchi examined the bird, I realized that not only was this going to be food, but just about everything on that bird was going to find some kind of use. The colorful feathers on the chest and tail of the bird would become part of a headdress or some other decoration. The skin and feathers from the chest are first skinned from the animal. These are going to end up in a corona or headpiece. The tail feathers would probably find their way into some kinds of jewelry, or even as a fringe for the headdress.
Sua ini shancha mi vite ini sua. Shancha mi vite. Nem kitemech tawan tron. Sham. Piteshero shitamin totai mbashwachtresi.
That's for the corona, for the headband. I'll make it when he gets back later with the other piece of skin. And that's chow.
The rat birds were left hanging in the jungle. Somehow, hours later when we returned, they were able to locate each and every one of those little packages. Basha shifted from his leaf call to another kind of sound, and then he lifted his rifle to his shoulder. Expecting to see another death, I waited silently. Oops. Even these kind of hunters need to use a cartridge. In the end, it really didn't make any difference. What happened was exactly what I'd seen each time he'd squeezed that trigger. Finally, the rains came, so we settled down to relax for a little while. It had been a successful hunt, but we had a long trek back to the boat. During that hike, I had a chance to consider the birds we'd be eating. Finally, I decided that, well, they're nothing more than exotic chickens. Once the birds were plucked back at the village, I got to looking at them, and God, they're ugly. And how about that flavor? Well, that's probably even uglier than the appearance of the naked bird. Usually when someone asks me what something tastes like, I'll say, well, it tastes like chicken. I wish these taste like chicken. How about Goodyear? That's what they tasted like. While the women attempted to soften the meat enough for human teeth, Basha went to work with his feathers.
The feathers the hunters bring home find their way into decorations and jewelry.
It's beautiful. Muy hermosa. Beautiful.
I told her how beautiful it was in Spanish, but sadly, she only understood Kandoshi.
He's obtaining chanta. Chonta. That he just dropped. It's amazing what they'll go through just to get a small amount of food. You see that small amount of food that he just gave to his wife there. He chopped down a whole palm tree and took a small section of it, peeled it, and that's like, kind of like a vegetable, real crunchy vegetable. And took a lot of energy to do that. This is the heart of palm. It kind of has the consistency of an artichoke heart, but it's a lot sweeter. And it's got a lot of moisture in it, so it gives them a lot of fluids for their body.
Disease is a common companion for the villagers. The sores on this woman's arm and leg are the result of leishmaniasis, a common disease in the jungle. Since medical attention is non-existent this far up the Amazon, they have to rely on cures that they find in the jungle. These cures were more commonly available when each village had its own shaman or medicine man. Sadly, those ancient skills are fast disappearing.
Yeah. He says, I'm sick, they're going to hold my hand so I don't fall down.
Okay.
And they're going to...
Fortunately, Basha and his brother Puanchi agreed to simulate a curing session with a shaman. The session begins with a request for assistance and a description of the malady. While the grieving woman leans over the victim, the shaman begins his examination. Tobacco plays an important part in the ritual, as it protects the caregiver from the demon that obviously infected the victim. As soon as a portion of the demon is withdrawn by the shaman, he rushes to the side and spits it out into the jungle. The cooperation of powerful plant spirits is enlisted to assist in the withdrawal of the demon. This particular herbal mix is incredibly bitter and gags the practitioner. Now that the demon is weakened and the shaman is fortified with his plant extract, he's able to withdraw the demon completely from the victim's body. He then rushes to the side and expels the thing into the forest. The next step is the application of tobacco smoke and a blessing that will keep the victim from being reinfected by that demon. Hopefully, the victim will recover and there will be no other problems. If there is, then perhaps that demon had babies. Because a shaman is thought to be able to place spells as well as remove demons, the position of the shaman is a risky one. One tribe might believe that the shaman of another tribe has put a hex on someone and caused them to die. In that case, that tribe is bound to go take the head of the shaman they believed to have killed their kinsperson and shrink it. Because of the many wars that broke out over shamanism, it has pretty much disappeared from this part of the jungle today.
This is called caucho. This is the plant that created the rubber boon in the Amazon in the 1800s and 1900s here in Peru. You can see here that the chicle or the latex in this small tree is being dripping out of into the plant here. This is what was sought after, this latex. These trees could get this round or more. Rubber boon mara, chicle, caucho. This is the waka plant. They're collecting the leaves so that they can make a poison that will kill fish in small streams. And then what they'll do is that basically it's poison the fish will float to the surface, then they can collect them. And they'll have dinner or lunch. When using this method to harvest or collect fish, one thing to bear in mind is the fish meat, or the meat of the fish, is not tainted. The plant poisons will prevent the fish from being able to utilize the oxygen in the stream. With a stream of this size, from the point of where the leaves are put into the water, about 30 meters downstream, the fish should be affected. If the fish aren't collected immediately, if they get into an area where there's fresh water, some of them actually may recover. They're stunned. Some may actually die if they're affected for a long enough amount of time, but the important thing is to collect the fish as soon as possible. And the poison tends to act immediately in the area where the fish are at, so they will begin to be stunned almost immediately. You can see how it's already, we're able to collect these small ones. These small fish, though, if you catch enough of them, are a small meal in itself. And if you're in a jungle survival situation, these things are pretty much ready to eat as they are. I mean, you don't have to really gut them or anything. You can boil them real quick and just eat the whole thing because they are small. So it's a nice little survival meal on hand. What you do is when you fold up food out here in Loreto in the Amazon, you put the fish or whatever into the leaf and then you fold it up. They call it patarashka. Then you take a small stem, and he's going to show you how to do it now. You just tie it up, and then you'll drop this into a pot and you'll boil it. And then you just take it right out of the pot, and then you'll be able to eat it just as it is. You don't even have to skin it or anything. And it's got a ready-made handle. Stick it in the pot like that, take it back up. Patarashka. Meat back and meat.
Here's a nifty little trick for jungle travel. This baby will keep you from getting lost and help you to find your companions.
When venturing off a known trail in the jungle, you need to be able to mark your trail to where you're going so you can return back to your start point. One way to do it is just like the Apu Alejandro has just shown you. As he walks through the jungle, he bends over vegetation. Most vegetation is going to have two sides to it, obviously, a dark side and then a lighter side. This light side is what you're going to look for. When you walk into the jungle, you want to bend it in the direction you travel. That way, when you come back, you'll see the light side. If you bend it the other way, it wouldn't do you any good because you just see you wouldn't have anything any distinction between this side and the other vegetation. So you flip it. That way you have a contrasting color. So as you walk through the jungle, you bend it over, and then when you come back, you're looking for that light colored side. In tracking, we do the same thing when tracking a person or animal. What we have is what we call aerial flagging. When a person walks, if they step on any vegetation, they will typically bend it over in the direction of their travel. When they do that, you'll see the light colored side facing up. That way you'll know which direction they went, and also you can spot it from a further away distance.